Hi, Dr. Rick Marks with the Relate Well Institute. So glad you joined us. Today we're going to talk about the wheel of knowledge. The wheel of knowledge. You think, what does that mean? Before we get there, I want to read something to you. Back in the 70s, Portia Nelson wrote a book called There's a Hole in My Sidewalk. It was an autobiography in her book of 5 short chapters. She actually called it the autobiography in 5 short chapters. I want to read the autobiography in 5 short chapters to you. Keep an open mind as I go through these 5 short chapters. Chapter 1. I walk down a street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I fall in and I'm lost. I'm helpless. It isn't my fault, but it takes me forever to find a way out. Chapter 2. I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I pretend I don't see it. I fall in again. I can't believe I'm in the same place. But it isn't my fault. It still takes a long time to get out. Chapter 3. I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I see it's there. I still fall in. It's become a habit. But my eyes are open. I know where I am. It is my fault. And I get out immediately. Chapter 4. I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. And I walk around it. And that's how most people are. But I said there are 5 chapters. Chapter 5. I walk down a different street. So many people keep walking down the same street because that's all they know to do. What they don't know is there are other streets they could be walking down. And the point of her little ditty here called an autobiography in 5 short chapters is, I just decided to walk down a different street. And as we go further now, talking about the wheel of knowledge, it is my hope that this might inspire you and your thinking. So you ready? I hope so. Let's kick in. Here we go. This circle right here. That's a pretty good circle for someone like me, huh? All right, this circle is going to represent all the knowledge that exists in the world. And if this is all the knowledge that exists in the world, how much knowledge of that knowledge do you think you actually possess? And most people accurately would say a dot. Now, there's a small little dot right there. I would argue I have less than that. I know you can't see it, but I can up close. So we're all admitting, I'll make this big enough so we can see it. We're all admitting logically, rationally, and honestly with integrity, based on all the knowledge that exists in the world, an individual's knowledge base is minute compared to all knowledge. We don't know much. Have you ever noticed, though, that when you're in an argument with someone, in conflict with someone, your brain acts like it knows everything. But you just admitted you really don't know much. Just beware of that difference. Okay, then. We're going to take all this knowledge and we're going to divide it into some categories. The first category is a category of the things you know. So in the realm of knowledge are things you know. Oh, and by the way, there's also things that you don't know. So in the realm of knowledge are things you know and there's things you don't know. And what you know and what you don't know have one thing in common. Your brain knows what it knows and it knows what it doesn't know. So what's something you know that you know? I'll help you along. Hopefully you know your name. Hopefully you know your gender. Hopefully you know your hair color. Hopefully you know what color it's supposed to be because you keep changing the color. You get the idea. There's things that you know. There's also a realm of knowledge, things you don't know. What are things you don't know? I always say in my marriage seminars, I know that I don't know quantum physics. I also know that I don't want to know quantum physics. You get the idea. Maybe you don't know brain surgeon, unless you're a brain surgeon listening to me right now, because you would know you do. You see, in our realm of knowledge are the things we know and know we don't know. And what you know you don't know, have one thing in common. You know what you know, and you know what you don't know. And here's the kicker, folks. The things you know, you don't know, is your dot. And it isn't much. Because in your realm of knowledge, which is a dot, it isn't much, are the things you know, and know you don't know. And here's the thing about the brain. The brain is a meaning-making machine. The brain is constantly attaching meaning. What does it mean? What does it mean? What does it mean? But it can only attach meaning based on its realm of knowledge, which is a dot, and it isn't much. So even as we've been talking maybe about 4 or 5 minutes here, your brain is trying to figure me out. Your brain is making assumptions about me based on your realm of knowledge of me, which isn't much. It's just what the brain does. All right? Let's use a practical example of this. Let's say my wife, her name is Luella, we're in an argument about something. You can only argue from your realm of knowledge, which is a dot, not much. So I'm arguing from my realm of knowledge. She's arguing from her realm of knowledge, both a dot. But in the midst of this conversation, my wife says something that comes from the massive area outside of the dot. She says something that I didn't know. You see, out here are the things you don't know. So now I would ask you, what's something you don't know that you don't know? And the answer is, I don't know. Some of you going, don't know, you don't know. Oh, I don't know, that's something I know I don't know. It's you don't know. What does that mean? It works kind of like this. Before the moment in time, when you heard my name, saw my name, or saw me, before that moment in time, you didn't know that you didn't know me. And the reason you didn't know that you didn't know me is you had no knowledge of me. The moment in time when you gained knowledge of me, that in that moment in time that you gained knowledge of me, I was no longer someone you didn't know. Now I'm someone you know you don't know. After this video, you may not want to know me, but that would be a different conversation. You get the idea. So let's go back to our example. My wife and I are talking, and in the midst of conversation that we're having a disagreement on, she says something that I didn't know that I didn't know. And when she said the thing that I didn't know, it conflicted with what I knew that I knew. Ever been there before? And when she said the thing I did or didn't know, and it conflicted with what I knew that I knew, in that moment, I also knew that I was wrong. Ever been there before? You're defending your point with somebody, and as you're defending their point, they're defending their point, they said something that you didn't know. And when they said the thing you didn't know, it conflicted with what you knew. But when you learned the thing you didn't know from them that conflicted with what you knew, you also knew you were wrong. Think about it. What do most people do in that moment? When they learn something they didn't know, that conflicts with what they know, they also know they're wrong. What do most people do in that moment? The answer is they double down, they get defensive. Whatever form that defensive takes, they're now defensive. Even though they know they're wrong, based on what they didn't know, they're still defending. You go, why? We say it this way in our world. It's because you're not teachable. We raise our kids to know one thing for sure about life. Mature people are teachable. Immature people are not. You always know mature people. They're teachable. And there's a scripture verse that says that wise men accept rebuke. But why do wise men accept rebuke if they're already wise? Because wise men know there's a lot of things they don't know. And because they know there's a lot of things they don't know, they stay teachable. But in order to live a life of being teachable, which is evidence of maturity, humility is essential. Pride makes you unteachable. Humility makes you teachable, which is also evidence of maturity. Practical example. Let's say I meet a guy named Bob. And I say to Bob, hey, Bob, are you aware that you have an anger problem? And Bob would say, I don't have an anger problem, Rick. And I go, got that. I asked, how do you know that you don't have an anger problem? He says, because I know. Because he knows what he knows. It's in his dot. Got it? I go, no, Bob, I'm asking you, how do you know that you don't have an anger problem? He says, because I know. And I would say, Bob, are you aware that you do this and this and this? Things he doesn't know that he doesn't know. You know, folks, we all have blind spots, don't we? We all have blind spots. Bob, were you aware that you do this, this, and this? He goes, no, I wasn't aware that I do those things. Well, you do, Bob. And these three things here strongly suggest that you have an anger problem. I don't have an anger problem. Listen to I word this. Bob, what you don't know is you do have an anger problem. This really is an issue whether you do or don't. This is an issue of your inability, listen to how I word this, of your inability or unwillingness to consider the keyword possibility. That what you think you know is something you don't know. See, whenever we're confronted with information that conflicts with what we know, in that moment, you have to make a decision. Move to humility and consider the what? Possibility that it might be right. You see, I didn't know I was passive aggressive. I didn't know I was manipulative. I didn't know I was emotionally a child. My wife knew. She saw those things in me. I just wasn't teachable. I lacked self-awareness. But it was still true of me. It just wasn't in my realm of knowledge. See, whenever you learn something you didn't know, that conflicts with what you know, in that moment you can make a decision. Move to humility, consider the what? Possibility. And if it turns out these things actually are true of you, then you've just increased your realm of knowledge and you can fix it. Can't fix something that's not in your own knowledge. But if it is true of you and you don't want to deal with it, that has another name. That's called denial. And denial is a different animal. You see, one of the things that is important to us in the Relate Well Institute is that if you want to transform, if you want to grow, you want to become a healthy, mature adult, if you want to become a master at healthy relationships, a level 5 leader, as Jim Collins talks about in his book, Good to Great. If you want to become a healthy, mature adult, high EQ, then being teachable is essential, but also recognizing you don't know much. There's a lot of things you don't know. So stay teachable. But once you double down, you're right and everybody else is wrong. As I told my kids, years and years ago when they were little, in the moment in time when you argue you're right and everybody else is wrong, in that moment in time, one or two things just happened. You became God or you became a fool. I don't think you're God. So don't prove that you're a fool. Fools aren't teachable. Wise men accept rebuke. Why? They stay teachable because they're humble in essence. And they also know, I don't know much. You see, I didn't know a lot of things about me, but Luella knew. And what I didn't know back in those days was a lot of the problems in marriage were actually more me than her. But in my little realm of knowledge, it was all her. And when I started to open my mind up, I found out there are different roads to walk down. I don't have to keep going down this road. There are different roads, different ways of thinking, new knowledge to be gained. But none of that will happen if you're not what? Teachable, which is evidence of one's maturity. Live a life of maturity. Stay teachable, stay humble. And remember, you don't know everything. It's just a dot. But guess what? If we stay teachable, it's evidence that we can grow and mature and become more well-rounded in all aspects of our life. Just a thought for you to ponder some of the core teaching here at Relate Well Institute. Thanks for listening, and I hope you have a great day.